So the next discussion we have is attracting, retaining women in manufacturing, and that will be by Nita Garza, who we've already met today, and also Sarah Roth. So I'm going to give you Sarah's bio. Sarah is a senior site logistics director for Dallas, Texas operations facility, where her organization is responsible for moving over 1 billion pounds of product each year. Along with her logistics role, she has additional responsibilities of developing the strategy for digital manufacturing and sustainability at Texas operations. Throughout the last 19 years, Sarah has held numerous roles across manufacturing, engineering, supply chain, including leadership roles in operations, maintenance, and logistics. Each role has provided her with a broad view of what it takes to build partnerships and get work done. Sarah holds a degree in chemical engineering from Clemson University. She is involved with many organizations. It's throwing me off. I can hear y'all talking. Organizations, both inside and out of Dow, including her role as the site sponsor for Women's Inclusion Network, as well as being an active mentor within the Society of Women Engineers and the Manufacturing Institute's Women Make mentoring program. One of Sarah's great passions is developing others and helping grow the next generation of talent. Please welcome Sarah and Nita. Thank you.
Good afternoon. How's everyone doing? I was going to say, do we need to do jumping jacks or something just to wake back up? I know it's still after lunch, and there's been some fantastic presentations today. Nita and I actually had some conversations over lunch that we wanted to retool a little bit about what we're going to talk about, because what we didn't want to do is completely rehash some of the awesome information that others have already shared. We just want to kind of add some additional talking points to that and provide details and fill in some additional gaps for you from there. So, starting from the top, I think we've talked about this quite a bit today. There's a case for change here going on. We all would not be in this room if there was not a case for change and talking about the skills gap. But what we're really here to talk about is the skills gap on the side of women. And so if we start to look at what we're going to be dealing with in the very near term, 2030 is breathing down our necks, whether we realize it or not, is that we're up against a really large skills gap. We talk about it today, but really if we put that in hard numbers, that's 2.1 million jobs that we're going to have to fill between now and 2030, which if you do nothing is completely insurmountable. But what you really need to do, like Ruth talked about this morning, is you really need to start tapping into talent pools that you might not have explored before. Because really that's where you're going to start to harvest some real innovation. You're going to harvest new avenues of talent that we haven't brought to the table before. If we keep going back to the same well, let's be honest, it's drying up. And so we've got to get to places that we haven't been before. If we don't do that for all of us in this room, that's real dollars. That's $1 trillion of value that we're all going to leave on the table. Whether that's lost sales, whether that's lost revenue, whatever you want to look at, it's real dollars. And so there's real actions that we need to take that benefit every single one of us in this room if we all come together to say, how do we pull these talent pools into our workforce, not just our company? So with that, women represent 47% of the overall workforce. But if you look at our industry, it's 29%. Which you've really got to look at that, and we've talked about all of these reasons today. But if you can even close 6% of that gap, which is not huge, that's 800,000 jobs. That gets you almost halfway of that 2030 skills gap. So really what Nita and I wanted to talk about today is, okay, how do you even get that 6%? Because 6% is doable. We're not asking you to move mountains. We're asking you to take small step changes so that we really start pulling that talent into our industry.
So the first thing that we want to talk about is one of my favorite things to talk about, and that's representation matters. So if you look at the makeup of your organizations right now, do they reflect what you want to see in your talent pool going forward? And I think sometimes that's a really tough question, and I think we kind of get in this vulnerable position of, you know, it's the truth is, unfortunately, a lot of us aren't there yet. And so I'll share my personal story. So I'm actually a second-generation Dow employee. My dad was a migrant worker, and he was 8 of 13 kids. So his youngest sisters, so my 2 youngest aunts, were very influential in my life because they're only about 10 years older than me. I spent my summers there. That's how I learned Spanish. But the other 11 brothers and sisters worked very hard to be able to put those 2 little sisters through college. So I grew up with 2 PhD aunts, one a neuroscientist and one in bilingual education. So when Ruth talked this morning about how your family are the ones who really market and set the tone for you, I didn't know better. I mean, I was going to college, and both of those careers were really, really important to me because my parents only spoke Spanish, and I learned Spanish so that I could communicate with my grandparents, but I loved being in my aunt's lab. It was amazing, and she she would cut the brains of rats and put them on slides, but I got to check them out. And so it was so cool for me, and that really influenced my decision to go into a science-related field. And so, like in my bio, I'm a biochemist is my background, and I thought I wanted to be a doctor, and then I'm like, too much school, I don't want to do that. So I said I was never coming back to Lake Jackson, and I was never going to work where my dad worked. My dad used to tell me, don't grow up to be a refrigeration man, and I'd tell him, like, well, I'm a woman. But I knew that I wanted to do something, and I ended up working out at the plants in lots of different fields, analytical, chemistry, engineering, and now in leadership, which is where I think I've really found my passion in developing people in that next generation. And so when we talk about representation matters, I used to be one of the only females sitting at the table. And I was usually not at the table. I was sort of in one of the chairs in the back. But when I started to see other females in these roles, it opened up possibility. Like, I now saw myself in this person. But when I saw other minority females in these roles, all of a sudden, it was attainable. And so even now, Sarah and I both work now for the first female VP of operations for the Gulf Coast for Dow. So when I sit at that table now with Sarah and some of our other leaders, Denise is responsible for all of our complexes along the Gulf Coast, and then she's a site leader for Texas Operation, our largest complex. I see the change. And what that does for me is it makes me want to continue to work there. And I want to continue to help pull other people up with me. And so I know what that feels like. It's motivating. It's making me stand on the stage and tell you my story. That's what we need. And so when we talk about representation matters, women have to be able to see somebody who looks like them. And honestly, it's not even just women. Men and women have to see people who look like them in these roles to understand that they too could achieve these results. And that what are the benefits of doing that? There are lots of growth opportunities. And when they see that, they get invested. But like representation is one piece of this, but it's not the only thing that drives inclusion and diversity in an organization. So the other thing is the importance of strong partners. So for those of you who work in industry, how many of you were the only female out in your areas a lot of the time? And how many of you had really strong supporters did you have a strong male supporter who helped pull you up? Or did you just kind of have to learn the ropes? Yeah. And we see a lot of fallout in that space because we don't get the same pulling, I should say, not hand-holding, but pulling with you. And so one of these interesting comments to me, and maybe it's a little controversial, but if you think about this and we really want to talk about the truth, women are evaluated for their experience while men are evaluated for their potential. One of the jobs that I have right now, one part of my role and my team's role is to hire all of our distribution and process operator roles. So we sit through lots of interviews in a year at all these different levels of experience. And it's interesting because even as a female, I have bias. But I'm self-aware, so I'm able to think about those things. But not everybody who sits in the room who is evaluating some of our future talent has that same level of awareness or has ever even thought about these things. And so when we're looking to hire these new folks, what are we doing to ensure that our teams who are identifying talent are looking at this holistic approach? Can we teach this person? And so we talk a lot now about skills-based hiring. And so do you have the skills necessary to be able to come and do the task that we're going to ask you to do in the field? So one example I'll give you, we were sitting in an interview. We had this interviewee who she worked at HEB. And she actually worked the curbside pickup line. So I learned a lot of things during this interview that were really cool. I love HEB, by the way, because I'm a Texas girl. So they actually would go out with their shopping carts, and they're timed, like on how long it takes them to fill their carts. And so it's kind of like an internal race. So then sometimes I kind of understood why these people were like going around me with their little carts at HEB. But what she was able to articulate in that moment was her ability to motivate her team to be the best because they were going to be the fastest. And they were going to do it safely. She talked a lot about safety, right? Like, you got to watch out for the customers. You have to do things right, like glass. So she also has hazard awareness, right? These are all skills that we're looking for in our talent today in our field. She talked about her personal conflicts that she had to manage because she also has a very young workforce. Think about how old the individuals, or I should say the range and generations that work at HEB. So all of these things were transferable skills. But had we not had the conversation with our team before, had we not talked about transferable skills and the skills-based hiring approach, she may not have been one of our top candidates. She was stellar. She was the best, and I'm sure that she's going to come out here and do great. But the next thing that we have to do is we have to set her up for success. And that's where these strong partnerships really come into play. We need men to advocate, people with experience. And so Sarah and I are actually a dual career. So I know I have a very strong partner in my life who is supportive and is able to help me and is really standing next to me, not in front of me or behind me, and teaching me things because we both work in the same industry but for two different companies. And so if I didn't have that, then I may not be successful. And if I didn't have some very talented male operators, male technical advisors, people with technical knowledge in the field who invested their time in me, I used to say that they took a chance on me, and I actually had one of them tell me, I never took a chance on you. You always had the potential. I invested my time in you because I knew you could be good. That's the mindset that we need every single person to have out there. Because at the end of the day, when we take the time and we invest in training the next generation, in training those people and skilling them up, it not only makes them really good at their job, but it makes our life so much easier. We have safe work environments. We have trainers. We have people who can go and teach others the right way to do things. So I know we are talking about the advancement of women, but at the end of the day, it's a partnership between our entire organization, no matter what your gender is, no matter what your background is, in order for us to be successful.
So really looking at that, we want to talk about how do you break those barriers? How do you break that down? How do we get good partnerships in the mix to begin with? And so one of the biggest things that you can do is making sure that you have good employee resource groups. And that can take a whole host of forms. You don't have to call it something specific, but do you have places that people can reach out and get the support that they need? That comes in the form of mentorships. Do you have people that can reach out to one another and tell them the ropes? A good example of this, Nina goes back to interviewing. I was sitting on an interview panel and I was talking to some folks and they were like, well, that candidate hadn't reached out and didn't actually come and see what the facility was about, and all the other ones did. And this individual happened to be in a certain pool of talent that I said, but did they know to do that? Because I know the only reason that I have known to do that throughout my career is that I had a strong partner at one point in time that was my mentor that took me under his wing and said, hey, by the way, you're starting to go interview for leadership jobs and you need to know this stuff. These are the things that the interview team is going to expect of you, that you've done your homework in advance and that you show up and you can talk to these things. I had known that individual and they hadn't had that coaching on the side to even have the inside scoop, if you will, to show up to even be competitive for that job because nobody had mentored them, had partnered with them to even make them successful. And so that's where we start to have talent leakage. Even if we bring them to the table, we talk about growth, we talk about being competitive, how do we keep them here? If we're not continuing to infuse those pieces of information into them, we're gonna lose them. And we're right back down to the skills gap that we started with to begin with. Same thing with internships and apprenticeships. And this has been talked about by some of the other folks, but if we've never even given folks some insight into what do we do out here? Do we get them excited about various different things? Bring them in, let them see what we do firsthand, and get them excited about our industry because frankly, I mean, I love it. I've been in here for 19 years. It's fun. You have your hard days. You have the days that you go home and you're like, what am I doing? But at the end of the day, this is fun work. And I think that the more people really understand and see that, the more they'll understand and get into our industry. And then making sure that there's operators and technician networks. A lot of times we talk about these programs and we really talk about the engineers. But we have really got to talk about everybody all the way down to the shop floor, the maintenance technicians, the operators, everybody. When they come in, especially if they're in a pool of people that have very different backgrounds from them, do they have those networks already established for them to be successful and they know that somebody's got their back? They've got that stupid question person that they can be like, oh, hey, whoa, I do not understand this. And they feel comfortable to ask that, and somebody is taking them under their wing. Nita kind of hit on our skills-based hiring, but really thinking through what are you looking for on that resume. And some other people talked about this morning too on the GPA. Like, what are you really evaluating there? I recruit at SHIP, and that is my hands-down favorite conference because I talk to all sorts of people from all different backgrounds. And sometimes you will see a GPA differential, but when you talk to those people and you understand how much grit some of them have, how deep they have dug, and what they are truly capable of, I don't care what that number says, because they have already proven to me by their stories and their background, they're gonna show up and they are gonna be a superstar. Because they are gonna be able to learn, they're gonna grow, they're gonna push the envelope, and they're not gonna take anything for granted. And so really making sure that you're looking at those skills, the soft skills and the hard skills, what does that really look like, and what type of talent are you really trying to bring in? Also, evaluating the interview process for bias, we've talked about this, and then diverse hiring teams, making sure that everybody in there, that everybody's listening for something different. We've all had different experiences. Depending on how and where you grow up, you use different words to communicate the same thing. And are you able to debrief in such a way that maybe if somebody's using we statements and somebody else is using I statements, have you debrief to understand what does that actually mean? And did you probe appropriately as an interview team to understand, was that person trying to tell you that that was their accomplishment? They were part of a team, that they were collaborative, but that was their accomplishment. I've sat in on some interviews sometimes that they said, well, they said too many we statements. I'm like, let's unpack that. What they were telling you is what they did. And if we had to go and probe a little bit deeper and really pull that out, but that was what was very apparent. That candidate was so well qualified, but we needed the different perspectives to understand the language that was being used to understand what that person was trying to tell us. And then attracting talent, making sure that when you're showing up to career fairs, do people see people that look like them? If you're going in with a recruiting team that nobody can relate to, depending on what's going on with that individual, that might be very daunting for them to even come up and approach somebody. Make sure your team is approachable to begin with. And then partnering with your local stakeholders, and it sounds like a lot of folks are with the colleges, but making sure that you understand the talent pool that you're trying to go into and recruit. What are the local challenges? What's going on with that group of people? And have you made those connections? And do they know you? And then retaining talent, really making sure, do you have flexible work schedules? And this looks different for everyone. This looks different for different job roles. This looks different for different companies. But I really challenge you, address your cultural norms. Address the things that you think are steadfast and really ask yourself, why? At one point in time, we had this bias in my facility when I was a facility leader that every morning meeting had to be at 6 a.m. That's when it had to kick off because there was no other way to have a productive day. I said, really? Why? What's happened at 6 a.m. that sets us up for like monstrous success that it has to be at 6 a.m.? And when I asked that question, everybody was like, well, we just get together first. I'm like, okay, what are we talking about? And we tried to really pull that thread, and we couldn't get anywhere. And I said, you know what? There are a lot of people in this organization, not just me, that have morning routines that we need to get kids to school and all the things. We are moving morning meeting to 8 a.m. And we did that. Our morning meeting, we were more productive. We talked about better topics. We had better engagement. We had better attendance. And we turned around safety performance because we actually had a very focused conversation versus everybody scrambling in and half the people are on phones going, did people get out of the house? What is going on? Like, the chaos factor decreased enormously. So challenge those cultural things that you think that's the way manufacturing has to work. If there's not a real reason, look to figure out what works for your new workforce on that front. And then make sure you have clear pathways for development. One of the things that we're working on right now is really, what does our journey look like? How are we bringing in talent, and how do we develop that, and is it intentional? Do we show them, you come in here, but the world is your oyster once you get here, and these are the ways that you can progress into each and every one of those different job roles. We'll partner with you, we'll provide you training, tell us what you want to do, and show the initiative, and we'll make it happen. And then making sure that you have good supportive team environments, a collaborative environment. It doesn't need to be everything's competitive. If you make things competitive and you start to box people out depending on their talent pool, they're going to leave. They're not going to want to stay. And then making sure that you have equitable policies. What I mean by this, one of the things that Dow went to within the last, 2 years, we actually went to full parental leave of 16 weeks. It's for males and females. And So it's very controversial for some people, but frankly, I think it's the best thing ever. Partially as a plant manager, I'll be honest, I'm selfish. If I think about it 2 a.m., if I have an operator sitting on the board that has had 2 hours of sleep because their newborn was up, that scares me. And I'm glad that my team could go home and they could get the sleep that they needed and the rest that they needed and the bonding time that they needed with their family and show up and be productive. Because the folks that I've seen that have actually left and had that equitable leave, they're happier, they're more engaged, they appreciate what we've brought to the table for them and their ability to be with their family. And when they come back, they're more plugged in and more loyal to our teams than they were before. The other piece of this is it doesn't immediately cause divide. It's not, oh, women, you know what, you got your nice maternity leave, quote unquote, vacation. It's everybody gets to go and have that bonding time with their family. It doesn't matter who you are, you get that benefit. And where you can create those equity tables for everybody regardless, that's where you can really start to push the envelope and continue to drive talent and engagement.
Yeah.
But I want to save some time for some questions because y'all have had some.
No, that's really everything that we had. So are there any questions that you guys have for us? Yes, ma'am.
This was really great, by the way. 2 quick comments. One, if you have an interview pool of, say, 6 people or 10 people, if you have at least 2 women in the pool, it quadruples the chance that a woman will get hired. So you should insist as a hiring manager that your recruiters find you at least 2 women. The same thing goes for diverse candidates. So it dramatically increases that. The other thing, it's one thing to have equitable family leave. Make sure the men take it too. If only the women take it, then it still is a punishment when women take it. So men need to model that behavior from the senior level down of taking that family leave in a meaningful way, because otherwise it's not really truly equitable.
I went retro.
Yes. Yeah.
I missed out twice. So.
Yeah, and I think, Ruth, you bring up a really great point. And that point being, right, like our actions, or our words as a leadership team, as an organization, have to match our actions. Or else it's just BS, basically. It's lip service, like we were talking about earlier. And so we have to make sure that we're doing, and not just recognizing things to check the box, but actually celebrating the successes of the groups that we want to see move for their contributions that they make, not just during March because it's Women's History Month or on International Women's Day, but for the whole year. And not just women, but who are those people who are exemplifying the behaviors that are helping us build this inclusive environment and work group?
So how would I go about, I just posted a job for me, and I got 0 female applicants. I talked to my recruiter, there was 0 female applicants. Very diverse from a male standpoint. So how would I go about, it's kind of a specialized, it's a QA role, a corporate QA role. How would I go about getting to a spot where I do have applicants for that position?
So, yeah, I don't know if you've seen the data, but so if women don't match the role requirements 100%, like if I can't check off every single box as a female, back in the day, I would not put my name in the hat. Whereas a male, 60%, even less sometimes, they're putting their name in the hat. And then you have this talent pool, and that's what you got, and now you're gonna hire from them, and you may have had a more qualified female. But I think that there are some cases where I've actually had leaders come to me and say, I would really like to see your name on my candidate list because I think that you have the skills that are necessary to be successful. I'm not promising you a job, but I think that you could potentially be good here and this could help you grow. I'm gonna throw my name in the hat because now you're asking me to, and I'm not gonna have expectations because you were very clear from the beginning with me about, hey, this is like, you could do this, you may have done this to your whole entire candidate pool, I don't know. But I think having those clear expectations, but then also it's motivating for me as a person to say, hey, they recognize the contributions that I've been making and they see some of these skills. And then I'm probably gonna come to you if I don't get the job afterwards and I'm gonna say, hey, I know I didn't get this role, but how can I be the person next time? What was I missing? Because now you reached out to me. You're helping pull me up.
Yeah, I think that's a big piece with like the mentorship as well, and then you being networked potentially as a leader into other mentors that are mentoring as well. Because a lot of times I will call my peers and say, who are you mentoring? Who's on the grid? Who do I need to just proactively reach out to anyways? And then we also work with our Women's Inclusion Network and cascade some of those jobs too, and then proactively reach out to some of those candidates. Because again, that baked-in bias sometimes of if I'm not 100% qualified, I talk to so many women that I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, you could blow this out of the water. You need to be
Why
applying.
didn't you put your name in
Yeah.
that?
We actually just had one this last week. She was absolutely my top choice. I had a little bit of bias going in, but she killed the interview. And beforehand, she was like, I don't know if I'm qualified. And I was like, are you serious? Like, so it happens all the time. And just really continuing to be proactive and intentional about that can really start to move the needle.
It's always also how you present that position, right, and how you word it.
That's so right.
We have to be very mindful because requisitions were generally written for men, let's be honest. And if you're careful and focused and intensive, right, and you can rewrite that. And there are tools and things out there, gender easy coders, you can run requisitions and letters and statements all through in order to make sure that you're addressing that. And then the visual imaging that you're using to promote your company, that change piece, right? You can see it in the presentations that people are doing today. It's making that more inclusive. It's including everybody and making it open, right? My wife spent 21 years in manufacturing, and she would discount herself at times. I'm like, why? Right? So, you're an amazing person. Why would you not? I mean, I got like 3 out of 12 bullets out there. I'm applying.
Well, and I think the other piece to that too is, so it is about the requisition, but don't forget about the interview questions that you're asking and how you're asking those questions. So when we hire for the apprenticeship program, there are some specific questions that we were asking, and one of them was very specific to like industry, like to a piece of equipment in industry. When we changed that to a leaking sink, oh man, we had women all of a sudden like knocking this. They were better at explaining and critically thinking and articulating what they were going to do, because I'm sure some of them have dealt with that before. And so just a small change like that helps to change the bias in the questioning to be more gender neutral. If when you're going through there.
Control that with the Dow apprenticeship.
I'm sorry.
We
Do
do.
you guys get to control
We do.
those questions
Yep.
with the Dow
We do.
apprenticeship? I have a little less. I control the BASF apprenticeship.
Okay, yeah, we do. We work closely with our talent acquisition team to be able, and HR, to be able to look at more inclusive questions based on feedback that we've seen or that we're hearing, and just the change in our skills-based hiring approach.
Yeah, see, and I got so many exciting stuff.
All right. Yes, ma'am, one more.
To answer your question in the back, I have been doing staffing and recruitment for about 8 years. I hired at the White House, FEMA, Department of State, healthcare, pharmaceutical, and I oversee 2 sawmills. You can change, instead of putting qualified, you could put preferred. More women will start applying. Also put a diversity statement. And you can change the way you do your questions from the beginning and the end, and also do meet and greets. So when you're hiring now, instead of saying, hey, I'm scheduling an interview, you can start saying meet and greet. There's a lot of different things that you can do to change it. And on YouTube, you can do free trainings with your hiring managers, your supervisors, and your leaders. You have to start there to get better qualifications, better candidates, and a better pool with talent. And it'll retain and stop some of the retention. Some of the supervisors, they're not well equipped and they don't have an HR background. So when they're interviewing, one of the questions, Tom is my safety manager. I have 2 plant managers. I'm the first woman, the first minority, and this company has been open since 1986. I'm also the youngest woman on my team as well, and I sit with all men every day. So it's very hard for me, and I have challenges. At my 2 plants, I saved us from 11 lawsuits last year. When I came in, we had 110% of turnover. We're now at 16%. Utilize YouTube for free resources. Also, you can hire coaches to coach your hiring managers, your suite executives, your leadership team, your labor positions. Go to YouTube. It'll be your best resource for you to utilize. Also, you can, at the end, I will be glad to give my number away as well. I'm a Master Certified Life Coach, and it's a lot that you can bring to the table outside what these beautiful ladies discussed today. So use YouTube for a lot of free resources, and you'll have a better talent and a better acquisition to bring forward to the table. Thank you.
All right. Thank y'all.